Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Coach Krisler's Convos. Today, I am joined by Michael. And before we get into his health journey, I would like him to introduce himself. Michael, tell us who you are, where you're from, and what you do.
Excellent. Thanks, Coach Krisler. Really excited to be here today. My name is Michael Krug. I'm a board certified health and wellness coach. I've been board certified since 2020 and I've been practicing since 2017. And I absolutely love it. Like you mentioned, we'll talk more about my story, but as for where I'm at, I'm located in St. Paul, Minnesota. So I might have a little accent some of you might recognize, which is always fun. And yeah, just pleasure to be here today and excited to have this conversation.
Yeah, so for those of you that are new to the conversation, we just talk with our guests about their health journey and how they've used functional medicine along the way. So, Michael, let's start there. How did you discover functional medicine?
Definitely, yeah. So I definitely went through, we'll say the ringer when it comes to more conventional approaches to medicine. And again, nothing's good or bad, right or wrong, but I was not introduced to different strategies until much later in life. So growing up, I was very unhealthy. There was a lot going on, physically, mentally, emotionally. It all kind of started when my parents divorced when I was young, between second and third grade. And it was my dad was a chef and taught cooking actually at St. Paul College here. He's retired now, but it was kind of a separation of, healthy eating, which we usually had up to that point, and that was kind of taken away. At the same time, I went from one elementary school to another. So my entire social group, all my friends was taken away. And then, yeah, just growing up with, a single mom who she did great. She did her best. She actually went back and got her master's, but I was from a young age forced to kind of fend for myself food wise. So it was a lot of, Kraft mac and cheese, a lot of, processed meats, processed cheeses, not a lot of fruits and veggies. And just kind of fast forward. So that was when I was, about 9 or 10 years old. And then by the time I was 13, I was in eighth grade. I was already over 200 pounds and my blood pressure was about 145 over 90, so elevated. And at that time, went to the doctor. And again, this is just a strategy that was provided to us was to go on an ACE inhibitor, lisinopril. So I started that at the age of 13. Didn't really address any behaviors and habits. So we'll fast forward another 3 years when I was 11th grade. After football season, I was always active this whole time, by the way. So like always been into sports. I still play broom ball. I'm not sure if any of your listeners know what broom ball is, or if you know what broom ball is. But I was always active. But again, the eating patterns I had were just very, very unhealthy. So I was probably in like the high 280s when I finished junior year of high school, or excuse me, sorry, fall of junior year after football season. My knee started clicking with every step, and I worked like at a grocery store pushing carts in. And then one day, the pain was just so unbearable. I had my mom bring me in. Fast forward a little bit, a couple of doctor's visits later, I had an MRI and was diagnosed with something called osteochondritis dissecans, which some of your listeners might know, but really it means that my femur, like the bottom of the femur, the condyle, was kind of jagged, and
Hmm.
it essentially tore up all of my all of my cartilage in my knee. And then through football, they actually found that my ACL was partially torn and then my meniscus was fully torn. I was 16 years old. So went in, at the time, it was a newer type of surgery where they drilled into my femur with the thought that the bone marrow would come down and heal the bone graft into the bottom of my femur. Pretty invasive. I, being a stubborn 16-year-old kid, didn't really take care of myself. I didn't do PT. I didn't use the crutches the way I was supposed to. So then fast forward 3 more years to when I was 20, I was actually outside playing hockey with some friends, probably this time of year, if not a little bit before. And I fell on my knee and that bone graft cracked out because it never fully healed in. So went in for the same round of surgeries. Again, fast forward to May. So it was May 16th, 2012. It was a Wednesday. I went in, I came off crutches. I actually, took it seriously that time. And I'll never forget, I stepped on the scale and I was 375 pounds. We went back and my blood pressure was 160 over 100 with a 10 milligram dose of lisinopril, which is like double the standard
Hmm.
dose of an ACE inhibitor. And I just kind of had this realization. I was like, I need to change or I'm probably going to die. So
Hmm.
that sparked in me
And you
the
were how old at this point?
20.
20.
Yes.
Gosh. Wow.
It's a
Yeah.
lot.
hmm
So
yeah, these are things that not that they're good, but we would expect from a much older person. You were so young at the time. Yeah, that's surprising.
yeah, and I love that you bring that up, because I look back at it now and I have a lot of gratitude because I had such an extreme situation that I was faced with at such a young age that I don't, if I wouldn't have had that moment in that
hmm
doctor's office, I don't know if I ever would have changed. And I have
hmm
no idea what the trajectory of my life would have looked like. Like I don't know if I'd honestly even be here, right? So, you can look back and you can look back at things that have happened and be like, this happened to me and, it's so unfortunate. Or you can be like, you know what? This happened to me. I'm actually kind of fortunate that I had this awakening type of moment to realize
hmm
and it really sparked me into learning a ton about health, about fitness, nutrition. I will say at the same time, my sister got into chiropractic school, which is very holistically focused as well. So it was kind of, she helped me a lot throughout my journey. And then, yeah, I mean, to fast forward from there, so that was 2012, completely revamped my entire lifestyle. I mean, everything from changing schools I was in to get a new environment to just the way that I approach food. And yeah, in 2015, there was pictures of me posted on social media after I graduated undergrad, just the transformation I had gone through. And then in 2016, I started like coaching people. People started asking
hmm
me for help, right, from social
Yeah.
media. And then I got shortly after that in 2017, I got into the Well Coaches program, and yeah, I've been doing the coaching ever since. I've been doing it full
hmm
time since last January 2022, actually 2 Januaries ago now. So I've been full time by myself for 2 years now, and it's been quite the journey. So that's my
Yeah.
story. That's the,
Yeah.
I guess, not condensed, but not the longest version, but like a midway version of my story. So thank you for letting me share that too.
Yeah, absolutely. So I love that you started with your early childhood. One of the things that I have noticed with clients and just with functional medicine in general is when you start digging, when you start peeling the layers back, when you start kind of looking back on things, you start to see signs so early on. So I love that you really started your story from early in childhood. How do you think those early years impacted you?
Yeah, great question. There's a lot of different frameworks or ways that we can think about it. And I think when we think about trauma, right? Capital T's versus lowercase t's. And some of those capital T's were definitely the ones that stuck out in my story, right? So like parents getting divorced, changing schools, having those doctor's visits. It's amazing how I share my story a lot. And those are the ones like I can't really fill in the gaps. And I know a lot of other things happened in there, but those are the big ones that stick out. And
hmm
being able to, set that aside and look at it for what it was and recognize, my mom was doing the best with what she had, and we were listening to the experts who had, my best interest in mind, right? Maybe it wasn't the approach that would have helped long term, but at least in the short term. So I think a lot of those, again, I trying to approach it from a level of gratitude and knowing that it really shaped me and who I am, and it forced me into my own journey and learning a lot of these things on my own, and then being able to actually, find ways to be more to have mentors and people along the way who help me. So I'm not sure if that fully answers your question. I definitely think that the way that I ate growing up, so it was a lot of binge eating, fast food addiction, secretive eating, a lot of that. I've shared this on other podcasts too, but my mom also has dealt with eating disorders her entire life. She's comfortable with me sharing that. She's opened up about her story as well. So like after my dad left, that was what I saw. Like I slept on the couch, which is its own thing, right? When I was all the way through like almost the end of high school. But
hmm
like I would see her come down from the kitchen with just stacks of like bread and cheese and butter and like massive foods at like 11 p.m. And then she would go to her room and I would go up and do the same thing.
hmm
Right. So like I mirrored some of that behavior. I'm not saying that it was her fault, but it was just kind of what I grew up experiencing and seeing.
hmm
And I do think that she also, because we were both doing these massive binge eating episodes literally every single night. Like, I kid you not, I probably binge ate over 2,000, if not over 3,000 calories every night between 9 p.m. and 1 a.m. for probably 10 years straight, right?
hmm
So, um, it's interesting to to take a look back at how that was, but in the moment that felt normal. Does that make
Hmm.
sense? So it's
Absolutely.
yeah, that's I think that's a big thing. And I work with a lot of people who, if you want to call it food addiction or just who have food patterns where they do a lot of emotional eating and it's sometimes it's hard to stop. I think I'm uniquely positioned because I have a lot of that my own experience with it. And I
Hmm.
know that's a challenge for a lot of people. And again, I trying to approach it from a level of gratitude, but it definitely shaped the way that not the way that I coach, but it shaped the way that I approach a lot of these things and recognizing
Hmm.
that, like you said, it's not just eating, right? There's so many things that go into it. So
Hmm.
yeah, it was a little bit non-linear, but I hope that answered your question.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I would 100% agree that our current circumstances are multifactorial, based on what has happened to us in the past. And I was born in the 70s, so I'm a child of the 80s and 90s, and there was a lot of foods that were touted as healthy, the cereal in the yellow box that's heart healthy. And
Oh
you
yeah.
know, I was a latchkey kid, so I grew up making my own meals after school and sometimes in the evenings, and so there was ordering pizza and you know lean cuisines and
Oh
whatnot.
yeah.
So
Oh yeah.
so my current situation is a product of the multiple things that I experienced growing up. And at the time, like you said, it wasn't necessarily that it was done to purposefully harm us, right? It was the circumstances that we were in, parents doing the best that they could at the time with the knowledge that they had at the time as well. So, but it is neat now to be able to have that understanding, to be able to know, why we walk those paths and why we make those choices, and that there are things that we can do to improve our health.
Yeah. Most definitely. I love that you mentioned the being an 80s kid and that being, that was like the anti-fat kind of portion of our society. And I still see that with my mom, right? And like that was, it's funny because that was the mindset that she had. So like underneath the bread and the butter and cheese that I mentioned was always a whole thing of like cinnamon toast crunch, not to
Mm,
throw them under the bus, but like but that was never the stuff that got me. For me, it was always like highly processed meats, highly processed cheese. Like that was kind of like my go-to I'd fill up with. But it's interesting how like her upbringing and that, earlier than you, obviously, but like that whole narrative still runs true in her life and still like to this day won't eat avocados because they're too high in fat and like scared of avocados. And it's just like, I think you obviously, yes, childhood experiences and the way that we are introduced to certain messages shapes how we perceive it. And at the same time, we need to also be open to maybe like experiencing and learning about other ways of operation and ways that things could maybe be like there is, two sides to every coin. It's not even a coin, right? Things are more of a spectrum. Like there's certain, obviously there's certain types of fat that we really don't want to have, but others that are super important, right? So
mhm,
nothing is just one side or the other. It's
mhm.
along a spectrum. So yeah, I thank you for sharing your experience as well.
Yeah. So when you mentioned, revamping your lifestyle, um, what was the first thing you went to? Like, what was the first area that you kind of attacked for change?
Yes, great question. The first thing I did was I quit fast food. And I need to preface this with the story because I call it fast food addiction because it legitimately was addiction. Like I felt out of control with it. Like
Hmm.
for example, when I was in college at my first college before I started to make a change, like I would go to work on the, Saturday or whatever. And on the way home, I would stop at three different fast food restaurants very strategically. One to take all right turns because I didn't want to take left turns on busy streets. But also the third one I stopped at had a garbage can right at the start of the drive-through, so I could throw away
Mm,
the wrappers from the first two restaurants, get a
mm,
very large meal at the third place, eat as much of that as I could on the way home, bring some of it inside, and then when I got home, it'd be like dinner time and my roommates, I would act like I'd only had like, a small snack, and then I'd make a whole pizza. Right. So
Mm,
I knew that fast food from both the nutritional standpoint, because like, this is before I started diving into actual, ultra processed food and the impact that has on human beings. But I just knew intuitively it wasn't healthy. I think most of us can know, like, you can, anyway, not to go into that, but like, we know it's not good for us. And I
mhm,
also knew that it was something that I was legitimately addicted to. Like, I could not stop eating fast food once I started. Like, I mean, to the point where like I would go and have multiple foot-long subs and just sit in my car, like go drive to a cul-de-sac where there's no traffic and stuff, and be extremely secretive about it. So I
mm,
did have the awareness to know like this is a problem, right? Like I studied psychology in my undergrad, so I kind of was learning a little bit about addiction. I was like, okay, I have a lot of the warning signs, but with a different thing. So that was the first thing I did. I cut that out. I was still eating some processed food, but at least I was making it at home and more aware of it, more
mhm,
cognizant of it. So that was the first one. And the second one was after I came off that second round of knee surgeries, doctors told me, I've had multiple doctors tell me I'd never run again, all of these things. I'd never kneel down without pain. Thankfully, that's not true. I can run and, I can do everything that I want to physically, which is, I mean, in and of itself is a miracle, but I think it's also a testament to the work I've put in. But I just started riding my bike everywhere. So I started riding
mm,
so part of it was obviously in the winter, when it's negative 12 degrees. I wasn't riding my bike then, but like I would ride my bike to work. I would ride my bike to campus for classes. I would ride my bike, even if I was going to party, right? Like maybe not the smartest idea, but like, there's a party a mile away. And so I would just like walk, or instead of, getting a ride with somebody, like, oh, I'll just walk, or I'll just, take my bike or whatever. So I just started to try to find ways to get movement in. Again, I had doctors telling me at that time that any sort of impact was not going to be beneficial. So I was like, my bike makes a lot of sense. And I always enjoyed biking growing up too. So it was kind
mhm,
of nostalgic for me at the same time. So it was really simple. I mean, I started biking as much as possible and quitting fast food, and then, learning about nutrition more as I went. So
mhm.
those were the two big that I started at the same time.
Yeah, I think, getting movement in as much as we can. I don't really think Americans realize how much we sit. Because it's just become such a normal, quote unquote, part of
Mhm.
our day to sit. We sit at work, we sit in school, we sit to watch TV, we sit to play video games, we sit to eat, we sit to hang out with I mean, everything we do lacks movement. And I think that there's that additional component now that so many people work from home
Right.
that adds that challenge of getting up and moving. So wow, what a great, simple way to just get moving without that impact, because of your, physical situation. But that's, I mean, very simple. So I'm curious regarding the fast food. What kind of um, support did you receive, and what kind of, if any, kind of questioning or kind of challenges did you have regarding not eating fast food?
That's a great question. No one's ever actually asked me that question, and I thank you for it. Um, I can remember one distinct time when I was making this change, and it was like winter break between 2012 and 2013. At the same time, I was transferring schools, and my mom picked up, I think it was McDonald's, and just brought it home. And I just told her, I was like, I'm not going to eat it. Like, this has been a problem for me. And she was just kind of like taken back a little bit. Like, she did this nice gesture and she was looking out for me. I was just like, I don't want that. Like, that's not what I want. But she also understood it. Right. So I think it was I'm grateful that it happened with my mom, because it was very easy to like set a boundary with her. Obviously, she's my parent, and I don't know. I have two stepkids, and if there's anything I know about having kids, it's that they like to set boundaries sometimes with parents, right? So that definitely helped out a lot. I will say, so when I did end up transferring, so I went from one school, St. Cloud State, to Winona State. I didn't have a car initially when I moved, so the trigger, I guess, for me, or just the thing that would set me off, oftentimes was simply getting in the car, right?
Mm.
Which is something that's, again, we talk about sitting, right? So many of us commute and we're driving from place to place. And I see that with a lot of current clients too, is like even stopping to get gas is a trigger to like get Snickers bars, something like that, right? So not having a car actually really helped. And then I moved in with one of my best friends from high school who knew he had saw some of my progress I was on, and I was able to open up to him about, what I was trying to do. So he was very, he had a car, but like we wouldn't go like, they would go to Taco Bell and stuff like that. But even if I did go, it was just like for me with that moment in 2012, I was so hard pressed, like never again am I going to have fast food. And I have had fast food since. I had McDonald's with my friend in China in 2015. But besides that, I literally have not eaten fast food, which people are like, that's crazy. But that's just, I mean, that was for me, it was a separation of an identity. Like my identity back then was like, I eat all this fast food. And I was just like, I'm done with that. Like, killed it off. So from a support perspective, I think, yes, people were supportive. And at the same time, I just drew such a hard line with fast food that I wasn't willing to go there.
Hmm.
Right. But it's actually interesting because I would still go, for example, like, especially if we were out like partying and drinking, like I would go to like the gas station hot bar and get something there. But it was like the drive-through itself was kind of like the trigger. So I've drawn such a hard line there, but yet I would still get like, a quick trip breakfast sandwich is no different than like a McDonald's breakfast sandwich at the end of the day. So I didn't, I still did some of that, not a lot at all, but it was like the drive through the fast food thing. I just completely cut that out. And even like being in the car and friends would order, and I was just like, I'm not getting anything. So
Yeah.
it's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So interesting. You've used the word trigger a couple of times, and you know, I, I don't think, again, that people necessarily know what that is for them. Like they know that they stop on their way home from work, and grab a Starbucks or, whatever, um, on the daily. But I don't think they realize that certain things in their physical environment can be those triggers for them. And it's so cool that you recognize that in yourself and then can help your clients also recognize, what some of those are for them.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of it's habits, right? And we know that as human beings, a lot of what we do is simply done out of habit, especially habits that precede said habit. So, being able to like delineate between one thing to a next and realizing that you have an opportunity to like have what I call just a pattern interrupt, like getting in the car, I have the opportunity as I'm, driving out, like I can take a different way. Like instead of going left where I'm going to go past, Burger King or whatever, I could take it right here and I'm going to find a different way to wherever I'm going. And I'm not going to have to go past that thing. So like little things, but again, a lot of people think that, it's, oh, I see the restaurant. That sounds good and delicious. I go, but realistically, the trigger could have been way back before you even saw the restaurant. Right.
Right.
So
Right.
yeah, that's what you're saying.
Absolutely.
So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't know if you've ever read the book Tiny Habits, but
Yeah. BJ
it's
Fogg, great book.
yeah, it was a part of my certification program. And so, the interesting about that is he talks about triggers, but in the opposite manner, right? You could create a trigger for yourself that helps you to maintain the healthy habit and keep that thing consistent over time. So even with something like that, right, where you may have a trigger that spawns a negative behavior or something that works against you, you can also change that around and build in those triggers that help those healthy habits.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah, his model is great. I love that book is, I mean, for your listeners, if you haven't read it, I highly recommend it. Another one, Atomic Habits, a lot of people have heard of
Hmm.
that one. I personally like Tiny Habits a little better. That's just me. I think maybe Atomic Habits, the writing style is a little bit different, and they're both fantastic resources. But yeah, definitely, a lot of people have heard of Atomic Habits. If you like that one, check out Tiny Habits because you'll love that one too. So plug
Yeah.
for BJ Fogg.
100% agree. Yeah, it's
Yes.
fantastic. So, looking at how you are today, what are some of the key things you would say that have improved for you?
Yeah. Well, I mean, starting with biometrics, right? Like, so my blood pressure right now usually sits right around like 115 over 62. And I haven't had any medication in over a decade for it. So that's obviously a big one. My weight, so I was 375 at my heaviest. Right now, I'm carrying a little bit of extra winter weight, but I'm about 220, 225. But my body fat percent usually stays right between 12 and 15%. I usually don't go much higher than that. So I'm in the healthy range. I'm also I'm very muscle centered. Like, I work with a lot of people who are trying to lose weight, but I let them know like there's a difference between muscle mass and body fat. And we want to grow and maintain and retain muscle mass over time. That's what longevity is. So there's actually evidence to show that if you're a little bit overweight, but it's muscle mass as we get older, it's actually helps with longevity. So
Mhm.
I'm all about that. Um, those are the big things I think, mentally. I was never diagnosed, but I know I was definitely dealing with some depression back then. And, you know, it's easy to look back and say, well, I changed my life and that helped me climb out of it. And in the moment, I didn't 100% know that was going to be it, but I just knew that there had to be different, better ways to live. Yeah, I think from a career standpoint, again, I was in school. I finished my undergrad in psychology. I didn't really know what I wanted to do with my life. I got offered a assistantship, so basically I had my grad school finance, and I was going to grad school for like educational leadership, and I still had no idea what I wanted to do. And then people started reaching out to me asking to help them, so I started doing coaching. It's fun to look back because you've been certified too, and like I was doing some coaching, but more just advice giving and being the expert, which is not coaching. So it's fun to look back and see like what I did that was okay. And then a lot of what I did, which was just not helpful. Yeah, you know what I'm saying.
Yes.
So I mean, legitimately my story and it became my career. Like then I realized, so after I started coaching, I had three people I was working with while doing grad school. And I was like, I love this. This is fun. And then I was like, oh, this is actually like a real profession. I can do this.
Mhm.
So it's I think with what I experienced and what I went through, again, I feel like I'm positioned to help a lot of people, especially, when it comes to weight loss per se, or just kind of changing aesthetic. That's something I definitely have a specialty in, but I really feel like I was called to do this. I feel like I went through a lot of what I did to be able to help people in this way. And that's part of the reason I'm so passionate about it. Like, I have a much larger vision to have, lifestyle medicine practices become the primary form of healthcare in the United States and in the world. I really think
Mhm.
that that's where we need to head as a society, not to mention if you look at healthcare spending versus health outcomes. I mean, it doesn't really make a lot of sense right now to me if we look at how that trajectory is going. So, yeah, it's kind of like from then to now, my life has obviously only improved, but I also have, a really big vision that I'm hoping to bring to reality. So it keeps a fire under my ass day after
Mhm.
day. Sorry, I swore. I hope
Mhm.
that's okay.
Sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, so I you had mentioned a little while ago when we first started talking about, the conventional medicine path and kind of that engaging with conventional medicine practitioners. And while there is a necessary place for that, right? Some people have to be on medications just to really it's just super important by that point, right?
Right.
Or surgeries and emergency medicine. There's a lot of places where conventional medicine really does do a fantastic job, right? We would not be here without it. But um, I'm I'm curious if you've personally seen a functional medicine practitioner, whether it's somebody who's a primary care or in some sort of medical specialty, and what your experience was like seeing a conventional medicine practitioner versus seeing a functional medicine practitioner.
That's a great question. It's definitely evolved over time. So when you say functional medicine, would you include like a naturopathic doctor in
Sure,
that? Okay.
sure.
So yeah, I've worked with a couple naturopathic doctors. I partner with some as well. Definitely, again, more of holistic. I've done things like, doing my blood work to see where am I actually at when it comes to, vitamins and minerals and what's actually going on rather than just blindly taking supplements. Doing things like food intolerance tests, examinations to see what kinds of enzymes I have. So those have definitely been very beneficial. When it comes to conventional medicine, it's like, yeah, like, if you tear your ACL, you don't need a health coach. That's, maybe down the
Right.
road, but not right away, right?
Hmm.
It is interesting you asked this question because in early November, I was reached out to by an internist who lives in the city that I live in. He found my information just on the National Board of Health and Wellness Coaching directory, and he reached out because he wants to start a lifestyle medicine practice or program within his practice,
Hmm.
right? And it was fascinating to hear because he's been in practice for 25 years. He's been an internist, right? So he's very much a lot of what he's done has been, diagnosing and finding the right medication to treat whatever it
Hmm.
is. But he told me in our last meeting, he said, I used to perceive it, and if this is on YouTube, that like medicine was here, the number one thing, and that
Hmm.
lifestyle was secondary, and that medicine would always be the most important thing. And he's like, in the last 6 years of learning more about lifestyle medicine and seeing some of the research that's come out, he's like, it's flipped. He's like, I believe, as an internist, he said this. He said, I believe that lifestyle and behavior is the number one, and that medicine is very important, but it is secondary to lifestyle and behavior.
Hmm.
So that gives me a lot of hope for the future. I do know there's a lot of people, especially nurses I know, who are getting more into the coaching side of things. I think there's a lot of people who are in medical school who are realizing that lifestyle and behavior is really a powerful form of primary care. And I mean,
Hmm.
you look at the statistics, right? It's something like, what is it? 80% of the spending is spent on conditions that is 80% of spending of healthcare spending is spent on conditions that could be prevented through lifestyle medicine, through
Hmm.
behavior, lifestyle and behavior change, right? So, yeah, as for, working with any sort of like MDs or DOs, I actually haven't when it comes to a functional medicine perspective, but I have worked with naturopathic doctors, and now this is one doctor who I am going to partner with and build this program out with him. And I'm hoping that it's, just a wave because
Hmm.
it's sustainability long term. That's
Yeah.
really what we're going after. So I hope that answers your
Yeah.
question.
Yeah. You mentioned testing in terms of, your vitamins and minerals and, what your, uh, liver enzymes are and your gut health and, the functionality of, internal organs and, all of that. Um, that those are things that are typically done by holistic minded doctors, naturopaths,
Mhm.
functional medicine doctors, and aren't done by conventional medicine practitioners. And,
Right.
for most of them, it's not because they don't necessarily want to, it's because they don't have time to, or maybe they don't necessarily see the benefit of that because of their training.
Yep.
Um, you know, there's certainly money factors that play into that as well.
Yes.
So yeah, it can be very beneficial. Now, of course, it can be very costly,
Yep.
but for those of you that are listening that are like, oh, I didn't know that there was a difference in testing, and there's a lot of other things that can be done, and you are worried about the cost, just like anything else, ask around. Call and
Yeah.
ask about their rates. And many functional medicine and integrative practitioners will have relationships with imaging centers and labs and things like that, so they know exactly what the cost is, right?
Mhm.
They can give you um, those rates, and there's a self-pay discount and so forth. So while yes, it could be more costly, it doesn't necessarily have to be. My family has been without insurance for a long time, and so that's the way we have to go. So it's absolutely possible.
Absolutely. And I mean, you can look at it in many different lenses, but one is as an investment, right? So if you're going to invest a couple $100s up front to get a really good understanding of where you're at, and then, as a bonus, maybe they have some sort of program or just different education and things to help you get on the right path. What are you going to save long term when it comes to deductibles if you're not taking your health seriously, right? Like
Hmm.
it's never too early to start. You mentioned the insurance piece too. I mean, I know I mean, like open enrollment's done, but I know there's different programs, different insurance companies out there now that are offering more benefits or more ways to work with people who are holistically minded functional medicine type practitioners and to get some of it taken off, right? Or to
Hmm.
have, a deductible to cover some of it. So there's just more, I think, a raising of consciousness around the importance of holistic healthcare. And a lot of these companies, especially health insurance companies, and now obviously doctors and people too, are jumping in to realize like, hey, as a system, we need to figure out how to make this work for everyone. So
Hmm.
a lot of options out there.
Yeah, a lot more. Yeah. And that's why, I do this type of program is because, you know, um, people really just need to know that there's options, right? And there's people that are out there willing to help, whether they are locally, whether they are, you meet with them virtually across the country. There's help that's available.
Without a doubt.
Yeah. So, one thing we haven't talked about, and I'm curious if you've noticed a change for yourself, is sleep. How has your sleep changed, or have you ever had an issue with sleep? I'm just curious.
Yeah, I will say right now, I am probably in the top 0.1% of sleepers. Take a lot of pride in how well I sleep, but that was not always the case. I mean, in high school, I would stay up until 2:30 a.m. binge eating and then wake up at 7 to go to school. And I did that for 4 years straight. And then in
Wow.
college, so when I was in college, specifically sophomore year, before I started making changes, I would go to class from noon till 3:30, and then I would go work at Wendy's from 4:30 until 1 a.m. I would come home and get super drunk with my friends and be up until like 4 a.m. And then I would go to sleep and wake up at like 11:30 a.m. just in time to get to my noon class. I will say I always valued education, so I tried not to miss class because I enjoy it. It's always been fun for me. But that was my sleep schedule when I was very unhealthy, and I did not know anything about sleep back then.
Hmm.
Um, I will have maybe once a month, I'll have a night where it's like, wake up at maybe 3 or 4 and can't quite get back to bed. But for the most part now, my sleep is, again, like I said, I literally take pride in it because I feel like I sleep so well. If I do wake up, I usually get back to sleep pretty well. I'm the type of person where if I have an early flight, I'll like get to the airport and I'll get to my hopefully window seat or maybe an aisle seat and I can like fall asleep before the plane takes off and then I'll wake up like right as we land. And it's wonderful. I'm very happy about it. I think the way that I live my life when it comes to, how active I am, my nutrition, not only what I eat, but also how I time my meals, my stress management techniques. I think it all plays into the sleep.
Hmm.
I don't think I'm just like an anomaly. Like I sleep well, but like obviously I'm a health coach too, right? So I walk the walk. So it's all interconnected. But yeah, sleep is when I talk to my clients, I say if there's like a pyramid of health, so to say, the bottom level is split in half, and half of it is adequate water consumption, and the other half is quality and quantity of sleep. Because
Hmm.
without enough sleep and without enough water, it's very hard to function cognitively, physically, or anything. So
Hmm.
yeah, my sleep, I mean, yeah, it was very bad for a while. And I do think part of the reason I gained so much weight in high school and retained so much weight was because, if you're only getting 4.5, 5 hours of sleep a night, you're not giving your body any time to recover, especially, as a three-sport athlete. So it's just like, yeah, that's wild to think about. Again, no one's ever asked me about that, but great question. I appreciate it.
Yeah, because all of the areas, nutrition, movement, sleep, relationships, stress, they all are important. They all impact us positively or negatively. And so, I think that it's important for people to recognize all of those areas are important to work on. And by the same token, we can't necessarily do them all at once, right?
Right.
So that's why I asked you where you started,
Hmm.
because you've been on this journey for several years, as have I, and where I started took me to the next step, and then it
Yep.
took me to the next step, and then I added something else. And so, you know all of these areas are important, but if you're wanting to make a change, start somewhere, build those tiny habits in, right? Make those changes, and then add something else, and then add something else. If you stick with it for the long term, you're gonna see some good changes.
Absolutely. Yeah. consistency is key, right? And I think what you were talking there, it reminded me of this graphic. It's not technically a meme, but it's like this graphic where it's, someone standing up like on a mountain. Everyone's like, oh wow, like look at how they got up there, like so amazing. And what you don't see is like behind it is this whole winding road and these stairs, and like some of it's like bloodshed. Like there's a lot that takes to get to that point. And what you mentioned too is so important. Like for me to go 375 pounds, 160 over 100 blood pressure, sedentary lifestyle, candidly getting blackout drunk 4 days a week, like all this stuff, to go from there to where I'm at now. Like I don't drink alcohol, I sleep really well. My nutrition, I eat mostly like gluten and dairy free, and very, just a lot of like, you can't go from that to that in a day, in a month, in a year. And I think actually too, another thing that helped with my journey and that helped me be successful from the start was like, as a 20-year-old, I'm like, I've been this way for 12 years. If I can get back to like optimal health 12 years from now, I'll call that a success.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very rare to have someone be like, I'm taking this in 12-year chunks, right? So like I was 20 then, I'm 31 now, I'll be 32 in March, and I can say I'm probably in the best shape I've ever been in my life. And again, it stemmed from an idea that I had 11 years ago, and then just consistent habits and efforts. And again, it's
Mm-hmm.
not consistently getting better, right? Like there's sometimes a better and a little bit down and then up and then down, but eventually, the trend over time is what's important. So having that long-term view is key, and the
Mm-hmm.
consistency. So
Yeah, 100%. Well, Michael, I have enjoyed our conversation, and I'm sure everybody watching has enjoyed it as well. If they want to get in touch with you, they want to follow you, they have questions, where can they find you?
yeah, so the best place, I have all of my information. So I'm very active on Instagram. I do have a YouTube channel, LinkedIn. I actually have a free course as well, but you can get it all at this link. It's michael.coachkrug.com/connect. So I can send it to you too if you want to include it in the show notes, but
Yeah.
all of the links are there. Yeah, free course that comes with workout programs and stuff. Really just, I've been through a lot. I have a lot of information, so the more I can help people and just provide information, it's something that I'm willing to do. So yeah, and you can always reach out.
Awesome. Well, I will include that information in the show description. And for all of you out there who enjoyed this conversation, make sure you give us a like and comment and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of the convos. And until next time, I'll see ya. Bye.